The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para-X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Illuminating the Paranormal, opening your mind to the possibility. I hope everyone is doing well tonight, and you guys are staying safe. I wanted to let you know that I am, it's crazy weather time here in the Midwest. We had freezing weather on Friday night with a big old high of 28 degrees. And tonight my high will be about 34, 36. So we're all really looking forward to some warmer weather. And this weekend, looks like I'm going to have a big high of 73 degrees. I know for some of you down there in Florida, that sounds like freezing weather, but I promise you that that is actually the beginning of our spring. And yeah, usually we get about 2 weeks of weather like this, and then bam, 80, 90 degrees. Summer is here. So we'll see what happens and what comes along from that. Let's see here. Oh, if you guys remember, I've been talking about the fact that I want so bad to have raised garden bed in my garden this year, and I'm excited. I know it's not much, but I'm excited because I actually found somebody who's coming over on Thursday, and he's going to take a look at what we have, and he's going to give me a quote to make me a raised garden bed. And I'm talking a big one, people. I'm talking like a good 12 by 12 or 12 by 14 U-shape, so everything's up. I don't have to get down on my knees to, pluck any of the weeds out anymore, and I'm just excited. I'm just really, really excited. I know it's just a garden, but for me, it's exciting. I'm just one of those people that love plants, and I'm excited I'm going to be able to do that. So, well, tonight I have with me as a guest a gentleman that I have heard speak several times at some of the different Paracons we've attended together. And, I've always been really intrigued by what he has to share. Tim Woolworth is one of the world's foremost ghost box users, and he's been featured using ghost boxes on NBC's First Look, NPR, the Detroit NBC News, dozens of radio broadcasts, and a television show, CNY Spirits. In addition to media appearances, Tim regularly gives public ghost box talks and sessions at several conferences a year, historical locations, and libraries. Tim has authored most of the accepted ghost box theory used today by active ghost box researchers via his site, itcvoices.org, which has been online since the spring of 2010. He also orchestrated the first worldwide ghost box experiment called the Ghost Box Collective that garnered astounding results. And then in 2018, Tim launched the site paranormalstudy.com, which aims to educate the public upon all things paranormal via a free library, newsletters, downloadable lectures, and articles. So please help me welcome my guest, Tim Woolworth. Tim, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Healthy, happy. Life is good. I hope the same is true for you and every one of your listeners tonight.
Good. Yes, I'm staying safe. I have been inside, with the exception of driving to Walmart or Kroger's to, pick the groceries up. So I've been good. I've behaved. It ain't been easy because I'm a people person, and I really, really miss being around a lot of different people. So this has actually been kind of rough for me, but I'm going to make it. I'm only down to 3 shows this year, which is rough. So I'm sure you haven't had any shows yet this year, have you?
What do you mean by shows?
Like any Paracons or anything you've gone to speak out?
I did 1 or 2 already.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I've only done 1 this year. I might have done 1 in January, I don't remember. But I did a Potographs in March, and then everything happened like a week and a half after that, and I've had 5 cons that have canceled as a result.
Ugh. Terrible. But I'm seeing a bunch of the Paracons that have canceled, that they are now getting ready to do a lot of the like an online Paracon where everybody can kind of they pay their little fee, then there's one that's coming up that's going to be like all day long, or is that happening this week? The one that's at the house, the Conjuring House, is that this week?
I think so, and it's a week-long event. And I did an online conference a couple weekends ago. It was organized by Beth Darlington out of the UK, who runs Access Paranormal, and she brought in a bunch of different lecturers. It was 8 or 9 of us. Well, 9 of us if you count both the Kling brothers, and it was fun. It was an all-day lecture that went. And there were a bunch of different topics. They had people from, great skeptics and people from ASSAP. And the goal was to get donations for Brit families that have been affected by COVID. So that was a nice thing. Yeah. And in the Midwest here, the big one that was going to be Midwest Parafest at Toledo, that's been rescheduled till August. So I'm really hoping that's going to still happen.
Good. Yeah, I don't know. I heard that they were going to reschedule. I had not heard that it was going to be August, but thank you for letting me know. Appreciate that. I know Fright Fest has been canceled till next year, and that was going to be one of my big ones because that was down in Fort Wayne. That is Eric's Paracon, and that which left me open to do the Chicago Ghost Conference, and Ursula Bielski already said that she's just going to do an online one. So we're talking. I think I'm going to be one of the speakers for that one.
Oh, fun!
Yeah, which will be cool. I love the Chicago Ghost Conference. I've been to that one so many times. In fact, last year was the 2nd year since she had started it that I had missed it, and I hated to miss it, but unfortunately I got booked elsewhere, and then she came up with the date, and I'm like, no, I can't do it. But, life, it happens. What are you going to do? So I told her, I'm going to try and do it next year, and I did not realize that hers was going to be the same weekend as Fright Fest, which now, like I said, has been put off until next year. I guess the big Fort Wayne Coliseum where they were going to have it is just not going to do anything this fall out of fear that, everything will come back and I'll have to shut down again. So they are just not booking things. So it's all right. It's all right. Plenty of other ones to do. SilCon. Are you at SilCon this year?
No, I've never been to SilCon.
I thought you had been. You're going to go down? You're going to go down to New Orleans this year to Haunted Bourbon?
Yeah, if Haunted Bourbon's still happening, I'm definitely there.
It is. It is. I think she just heard that, I guess the parish that they're having Haunted Bourbon in is actually not within the city limits that allows them, where they're like really being really restrictive. I think the parish that they're going to be in is right on the outskirts or something to that effect. So she's not affected. So she's excited. I think she's still going to have it, to my knowledge. So that'll be cool. I like that. I've done that one. I did her very first one. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going down to that one or not. That's a long way for me to go. Being a vendor, it ain't like I can fly. So exactly. That is a long drive, people. Long for me. I think it took us, I think it was almost like 17 and a half hours to drive down. Yeah. Well, we did some stopping, but only a little. I think it's like 16 and a half hours, but I think we stopped for a little bit. So yeah, that's a long one. So if you're going, fly. I highly suggest you fly. So, well, Tim, I wanted to talk to you. You have done some wonderful talks over the years. And one of them, there's all kinds that you do. I mean, you've got ITC Voices, What Are Ghost Boxes, Working in the Light, Conscious and Paranormal Studies, which is a good one, Examining the Hard Problem of Consciousness in the Field of Paranormal Studies, ITC and Alien Contact. Now, that's one I'm interested in, but what one would you like to talk about tonight? Which one would you like to share with us? Just give us like an overview of one of your talks.
Well, my talks all kind of blend together because I'm basically known as an ITC specialist, instrumental transcommunication. I've got one of the working definitions of ITC that's being used in the field today. It's been my goal to refine the definition of ITC. So the definition I put forth is the one that's being used most regularly in the field today, which is probably my crowning accomplishment. But yeah, I focus on a lot of different aspects because there's so much in the paranormal that is directly related to ITC that people don't realize. I mean, when we're using Ovilus or phone software, ghost boxes, EVP, even photography, that is all ITC. So ITC is just a common thread that runs throughout the paranormal, and most people don't align it with the paranormal, which is it's a real shame. So, and the other thread that runs throughout the paranormal is consciousness, because, well, one, we don't know who or what we're talking to or communicating with at any point in time, other than we know it's a discarnate consciousness that has intelligence behind it that wants to communicate with us. So consciousness is another one of those things that is super overlooked by people in the paranormal, because one, we're communicating with consciousness, and two, our consciousness that we perceive the paranormal with is also overlooked. There are big questions out there as to whether we're actually even creating our own hauntings through projection, which is just something that's absolutely fascinating. I mean, there's a lot of threads we can examine here, and I'm just going to let you steer the boat. Where do we want to go?
Well, I'll tell you what, Tim, we actually have a question in the chat room, so let me get that asked to you. Tabby asks, at what speed do you think is the best to use for the ghost box?
Okay, in that particular instance, I'm assuming she's talking about the commercial ghost box, which is the SB7 or SB11. That is a ghost box that's quite different from the other ghost boxes that are out there, because it utilizes a digital tuner, it utilizes digital white noise, and if I'm not mistaken, it has 4 or 5 settings based in milliseconds on how fast it can go. Now, when you're using a ghost box of any type, the key thing is that you are providing enough intermittent communication for communication from the other side to occur, while making sure that you do not get false positives. So a lot of people who are starting out, they like to listen at a much slower clip, where they'll put it at like 3/4 of a second or a full second interlude on each particular station. When you do that, you can get a false positive, because you can get several words in a second, and you can misconstrue that as communication. Now, I look at the progenitor of the ghost box, Mr. Frank Sumption, who invented it, and he liked to use it as fast as possible. And there were a couple reasons for this. One, you're not going to get false positives. You're not going to get multiple words, because you are jumping from station to station so fast that you're not going to get solid communication. For example, the 20-125, which is one of the early shack hacks, you'd basically you'd take a stopwatch, and at the start of the sweep to the end of the sweep, and then you divide it by the amount of channels, and you find out it's on any given frequency for 0.07 seconds. So you look at that, and it's absolutely fascinating because it's going to be on you're going to get at least 12 stations in a minute. So if you get a full sentence communication, it isn't a false positive. So one, you avoid false positives, and he also used the fast speed because, white noise and intermittent radio noise is used by the other side to facilitate communication. So the faster that you're scanning through these particular stations, the more that communication is able to be utilized by the other side to formulate communication that we can hear. So, that's the long answer. The short answer, where it sounds good to your ears, and so you don't get false positives. So I would definitely keep it at a half second or less.
Okay, all right. No, go with the long and the short, because there's some of us that understand, there's some of us that are on the cusp of understanding, and there's some of us just go, okay, I'm waiting for the short answer. So please, all the answers are good. I have another question for you. Sherry would like to know which ITC box was or is the best in your opinion?
Oh, that's a very subjective question. For me, it can be any given box on any given night. When I lead a hunt, you'll see me bring probably 10 boxes with me. And depending upon the location and the environment around you, some of the boxes that are the best won't work. For me, my standby is a Mini Box Plus. It's been my standby for several years. But I know if I'm in a basement that it doesn't have windows, or I'm in a tunnel or anything like that, I'm not going to get enough reception for it to work because the tuner's just not strong enough. Yeah. And that's where a shack hack will come in handy. But yeah, there are several boxes that are made out there. Some I have that have digital tuners, some that are analog tuners. And yeah, it's any given box on any given night. And I know that is a terrible answer, because what that basically means is if you want to be serious about it, you've got to try a bunch of different boxes, which, it takes a lot of money and a lot of time to build up a collection of boxes to do that. But yeah, there'll be times where you can bring a box and you're going to get absolutely nothing. That's why I always have backups.
Yeah, agreed. I have the SB7 and one of the original shack hacks. So I have, two different ones. And it was nice having that down at Waverly, because when you got deep into sometimes like in the middle of the main hall. Have you ever been to Waverly?
I've not. I've missed my two opportunities to go there. Okay.
Well, we'll have to remedy that. When you get deep into the hallway where the patient rooms are, sometimes, or deep down into the basement by the death tunnel and stuff, your SB7 doesn't work as well. That's where, the old original shack hack for some reason works so much better. But, we had fantastic. I mean, we had an SB7 and an SB11 going, in the mortuary, and we were asking questions and getting straight answers. Both boxes, same time. It was like stereo. And it just got some wonderful, wonderful answers right away to the questions we had. We ended up having to stop because there was a spirit, entity, whatever was there. Every time we started to ask a question, this thing would start to scream. It sounded like they were screaming words, but it was so high pitched, it was hard to pick out any word. And the thing that it wasn't so much that they were screaming, but the energy that were taken, because in the mortuary, with all the lights off, the only light in that room was from the exit sign, which was up by the door, and the little red dot on the speakers that were attached to the SB7 and the SB11. They each had their own. So there was two little red dots and the exit sign. That's it. That's all the light in the room. And every time this spirit, entity, whatever was there, would scream, the exit sign and the lights on the speakers would dim. So we're like, okay. And then everybody started to not feel well. So we knew it was really pulling and draining. So we stopped and ended that session. And, we kind of split up after that. Each group went a different way. I lucked out and was able to, we were supposed to go there with just 10 people. 2 people dropped out. So it was only 8 people for that huge place. So we got to do a really, really good investigation. Second time I went, out of the 10, only 6 showed up. So that was an even better one. So
yeah, that's great.
I know. But yeah, we had some really good, just right on answers. We'd ask the question and an answer would be there. So it was good. It was really good.
Yeah, those are the best sessions. I love them when they happen like that.
Yes. Yeah. And you know what? The first time it was like that. Second time we went, nothing at all. So like you said, it almost kind of depends upon the place and the night. Sometimes they're tired, I think. They get worn out.
Or it could be somebody who you've brought with you in that particular group, and it's actually that person's actually manifesting the communication that night. We just don't know the answers.
Yeah. Yeah. See, you've got answers that other people don't think about, and I love that. I really do. So tell me a little bit more about ITC and alien contact. What kind of results have you come up with, or evidence that you've been able to gather?
Oh, quite a lot. And it's not only me. The fascinating thing is that alien contact's been happening through ITC for, at least 40 years now. 50 years, excuse me. Started with Constantine Roth. Well, no, let me back that up. We're talking 60 years now. Started with Friedrich Jürgensen, who actually called EVPs before they were known as EVPs. He actually labeled them voices from space. And he thought that there was some spirit communication and some alien communication. Then we fast forward to Radava. He got some voices that he thought were alien in origin. Going throughout the 70s and into the early 80s, we had Raymond Cass, who recorded he has a whole section of EVPs that he thought were alien in origin.
Wow.
Sarah Estep, the same thing. She had a bunch of voices she thought were alien in origin. And I've recorded a bunch of them off of ghost boxes as well that are definitely non-human sounding. The first one that really jumped out at me was actually in relation to Frank Sumption. Frank was a very good friend. He died back in August of 2014. As I intimated earlier, he invented the ghost box back in 2002. And Frank invented the ghost box not to talk to spirit, but believe it or not, to talk to aliens.
Aliens, yes.
Yeah. And the boxes told him through his entire 12 years using them that he was actually one of them. He was a purple alien girl. Their princess is what he called them. That he had been brought here from Pleiades, and they were sending a ship to pick him up again. And he wholeheartedly believed this, and a lot of people thought he was a quack because of it, and they made fun of him. And the time I met Frank, he actually had purple earrings and purple studs to be the purple princess. It was very endearing. And in late April, a little over 3 months before he died, I recorded a crystal clear communication. It was about 2 minutes in length. And everything that they had said about Frank through Frank's recordings came through on mine. It said that they brought Diva to us, that he was purple, he was the princess. They came from Pleiades. He was sent by the ship. He was going up next, and he was going to depart. And this was 3 months before he died. So, yeah, when he died, that particular clip, because I already had it up on YouTube, and I had written an article about it, got picked up by the Huffington Post and a few others, and it became a very popular clip because it was the first time somebody had demonstrated possible alien contact from the other side that had predicted the future. There's a couple clips in there, like we brought Diva to them and sent by the ship, where it's very electronic. It's just insane when you listen to it. There's no human intonation behind it whatsoever. And and I've recorded other things throughout the years as well. And I interweaved them in that particular lecture with some ITC images that that colleagues of mine have gotten through agitating water or through steam or through video ITC.
Wow.
Where you get full-fledged images that are pretty much the prototypical gray. It's pretty interesting that we're getting all of these forms of communication coming through to us, both audio and visual, from beings that may be alien in origin.
Wow, that's I whether I missed that part of your talk or I've never heard that one before, but I didn't realize they were doing it with like water and video and that kind of stuff. That they were, wow, that's kind of cool.
I've only given this talk at UFO conferences. I've never given it to.
Which would be why I missed. Okay, there we go. Yeah, because Michigan Paracon and a few others I think I've seen you at. So that would be why. Okay. We did have another question in the chat room. Tabby would like to know, what do you think of the more recent Echovox that's out there?
Well, Echovox is something that I have been using since it was first released. Danny, when he came upon Echovox as an idea, it's a brilliant idea because it incorporates everything that is about ITC, micro audio files, randomization, and noise. And all of these things are critical to the formulation of ITC communication. And Danny doesn't admit it, but I think he got the idea off of EVP Maker, which was created by Stefan Bayan back in 2000, where basically you'd feed in audio, any audio file, and it would slice it into micro audio files of your selected length. So a lot of ITC researchers back then would put in Chinese or German, a language they don't speak, and slice it into, hundredths of a second, tenths of a second. And then it would randomly, you would type in a question or speak your question out loud, and it would randomly play the audio out, and you would get sentences as a result, because basically you're slicing it into phonemes and morphemes, and it would be digitally altered, and you would be able to communicate. Now, what Danny did is he implemented that same kind of structure from EVP Maker, but used multiple outputs at once. So with Echovox, basically you use a particular bank of your choosing, and depending on the iteration that you have, it can have anywhere. The classic has 4 outputs, and I think the modern one has 8 now. And what happens is it spits out these micro audio files, and it'll grab from multiple channels at once, and each one of the audio files is tenths to hundredths of a second, and it will, in a blend mode, it will blend 4 different random associations together, spit it out, and the ideal use of Echovox is this particular sound file is going to go out through a speaker, which will be on any amount of feet from your phone or laptop. So a speaker on the other side of the room, let's say, for example. And what happens is the microphone on your tablet or your phone will pick up what's coming out of the speaker while regurgitating what's coming out through grabbing the channels randomly. What this does is it creates an echo loop. So you're building sounds on the echo while spitting out fresh sounds from Echovox, while your voice, while you're speaking, is also in the echo loop. And what you're doing is you're creating noise for that ITC transformation. And because of that, I still say to this day that the only application I trust on the market is Echovox.
Yeah. I've been to a couple investigations with them using them, and just unbelievable some of the stuff that they were able to have come through. Just blew me away. I was just really, really impressed with it, and it's the next thing on my my paranormal Christmas list, shall we say?
Well, Echovox is rather inexpensive. You just got to make sure you have a speaker. And the problem is if you use iOS, he never figured out the Bluetooth with iOS, so you have to have like a wired speaker, which is a pain in the butt. So I'd recommend using Galaxy, Android, any of that stuff. It'll work just fine. But iOS, you can't use a Bluetooth speaker.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just, I'll get it. It'll happen. I just, I've always been lucky that I was able to investigate with my friend Karen. We do a lot of different investigations, but two of the guys that I do investigations with a lot, with Eric and Ken, and they are just tech gurus. They buy anything and everything on the market, test it, play with it, enhance it in any way they can. So I've never felt the need to buy my extra equipment because they've always had all the new toys. So it's like, I'll wait and see how they like it, and I'll decide. But yes, that's on my list. I definitely need to get one of those, and that's just going to have to happen. So, well, Tim, I'll tell you what. Let's take a few-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll do some more talking. How's that sound?
It sounds wonderful.
All right. Okay, guys, you are listening to Illuminating the Paranormal on Para X with
your source for everything paranormal. Para X.
Hey, this is Lee.
And this is Michelle.
And this is Dustin from the Dead Zone.
Your source for everything paranormal. Para X.
I found it at last! Marla's Sacred Cauldron. This is the legendary artifact that has been whispered about in hushed tones for hundreds of years, and now it's mine! All mine!
Who dares defile the sanctity of my castle walls? Step away from the cauldron, you impertinent, muddy-metaled maltworm.
Never! I've spent half my lifetime trying to discover your age-old secret of stirring the cauldron.
Oh, for Merlin's sake, that's no deep, dark secret. Just tune into the Para X Radio Network Thursday nights at 9 o'clock Eastern for more cauldron stirring than you can shake a wand at.
Oh, well, in that case, I guess I don't need to take up any more of your time, so I guess I'll be going.
Not just yet. We've got a little unfinished business to take care of.
That's Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern on the Para X Radio Network.
Welcome back, everyone, to Illuminating the Paranormal. My name is Tina Marie, and my guest tonight is Tim Woolworth. Tim, we were talking about some different ITC talks that you do, and thank you, because you have so much knowledge, but you are so very, very sweet to break it down for some of us, like me. So, because you just have this knowledge, but it's hard sometimes for me to understand all of it, but you're so good about breaking it down. So I really, really appreciate that. There's a talk that you have been giving. It's called The Consciousness and the Paranormal, and you have part 1 and 2. And part 1 is a new understanding, and part 2 is known discarnate voices. Do you want to give us kind of an overview of those talks?
Oh, well, yeah, those are actually articles, not talks.
Okay, I apologize.
Not a problem. Yeah, the first one was how I came to my own understanding of the role of consciousness in IT, and I think these two articles are based on ITC, and I had always thought that, when I went into an investigation, let's say, and I was communicating with the spirit, when I was first starting out, I was like, well, for example, used Waverly. So if I went into Waverly and I went into the death tunnel, I must be talking to somebody who was wheeled down that death tunnel or who died in the asylum itself. And that's the longer that I've done this, I don't believe that at all anymore. Mm-hmm. We simply don't know who or what we're talking to at any point in time, and more importantly, we don't know the locus. Where are they in time or space when we're communicating with a discarnate consciousness? And that's the fun part. You can reach outside the mind spectrum and say, hey, what if what I'm communicating with is a ghost hunter 300 years in the future trying to ghost hunt, and they think I'm the spirit? I mean, I have no evidence of that, but these are questions that we have to ask. And these are things that we need to understand. And one of the key things I always try to drill home to people is there are no experts in various disciplines in the paranormal. There's just those with more experience. And the more experience that you have, the more you should question everything that you're doing. And I've learned a lot in ITC. And especially intertwining it with consciousness. So I've brought consciousness into the definition of instrumental transcommunication, and my working definition of instrumental transcommunication is it's the use of an independent third-party instrument, which allows you to record, and it provides a mechanism for the review of communication from discarnate consciousness of an unknown origin. Basically, what this is saying is that you're able to use a device, any device that we use for ITC. Let's just take EVP, for example. So we're using an independent third-party instrument. In EVP, that independent third-party instrument is your recorder. So that allows for ITC communication to not only be recorded, but it provides a mechanism for that recording to be played back for review, not only by you, but by other people that you want to examine your evidence. What we know is what we're recording is that it's a consciousness of an unknown origin that wants to talk with us. So that's my overall encompassing definition of ITC. And you cannot, with this definition, you cannot remove consciousness from the device. Because if you take consciousness away, you're going to record nothing. You have to have a drive to communicate with us, and you have to have a device to communicate with, to record the communication with. That was kind of my breakthrough, to realize that consciousness plays a very critical role. And consciousness is a hard thing to understand. The leading consciousness theorist in the world is Dr. David Chalmers. He's in the University of Canberra in Australia. And he came up with something called the hard problem of consciousness. And what basically it boils down to is, why are we left with a unique inner life experience, a sense that's individualized, if our brains are designed to process information in the same way? So I can look at this beautiful spring weather we're having today, and I can look at the grass that's out there. And yes, it's green grass and it feels lush on your feet, but that feeling on my feet is going to be different than the feeling on your feet. The smell of cut grass is going to bring up different memories for me than it will for every one of your listeners. Right. So we're all experiencing this world around us, but we're experiencing it in different ways, even though our brains are pretty much all wired the same. And that shows shows that there is a consciousness. And if there is a consciousness in the way that we are examining the world, then it should be thought that that consciousness is going to carry over to the other side. And there are so many pieces of evidence out there that have shown that consciousness exists on the other side, outside of EVP and everything else. And the conscious experience is something we cannot negate in the paranormal. So, for example, there have been a few things that have happened out there, and they're intelligent. For example, EVP is very intelligent. We get communication from the other side. We also have other forms of ITC, such as ghost box photography, scrying video, where we get images that appear on demand. It's conscious intent showing us alien communication, conscious intent coming through. And then we start to reach out to realizing that intelligence, our consciousness, transcends us, and we wind up with something called transmediumship. For example, that's where a discarnate consciousness takes over your consciousness as the medium and speaks through you using your body. You're like a puppet that's being controlled by a puppeteer. And the interesting things about this is that this has been studied not only through the SPR and the ASPR and RHINE and other institutes like that, but actual labs at universities. At the University of Pennsylvania, there was a study on a form of transmediumship, which a lot of us out there are familiar with, psychography. It is automatic writing. So in automatic writing, for those who aren't familiar in your audience, basically a spirit overtakes your body and controls your hand. So you can be doing anything, reading a book, watching TV, whatever. But whether you're right-handed or left-handed, you put it on a sheet of paper and it will just start writing on its own. And there have been a lot of books out there that have come from spirit. That was actually in vogue very much so from the 20s right up until the 80s, where it was all channeling through spirit and automatic writing. It's kind of fallen by the wayside now. But during the state, they found through scanning that the part of the brain that's used in writing, the frontal lobe, the activity during automatic writing, that language center in the frontal lobe, the activity went down as opposed to up, as it should when you're writing. More importantly, in an A/B comparison between the people who were writing their standard written work versus the stuff that was done through automatic writing, the content produced was much more complex. Which is just fascinating when you think about that discarnate consciousness coming through and taking over a body to create a better communication and overriding the brain to make that happen. At the University of Arizona, they found that with a bunch of various mediums over time, that at trance states, they were able to correlate that certain mediums can anomalously receive accurate information from deceased individuals. They had no idea who they were. They were just basically given a date, a time, and a location when they walked into the lab, and they were able to figure this out in a lab, which is just absolutely fascinating because they were able, in this trance state, to be able to figure out these things. We also have, for example, near-death experiences, another giant consciousness area of study. We realized that we have a soul. Some people call it a spirit. However you want to refer to it. And from time immemorial, when somebody dies, there's this archetypal tunnel of light. Well, it's not a tunnel of light. It's a tunnel with a light at the very end. And this is something that has been, it was written about in ancient Greece. You look at Hieronymus Bosch painting it in the 15th century. I mean, it's just with people on the other end welcoming you in. It's just something that's always been prevalent in our culture. And nobody had really examined it before Raymond Moody, who started to do all these studies in the 70s and realized, hey, all these people are reporting this, and they're all reporting pretty much the exact same experience. Now, there's a lot of studies out there that say that, oh, well, when you die, it's the glutamate or I can't remember what the other chemicals are, but yeah, it's basically creating false images in your mind as your brain's going through hypoxia. It's suffering from lack of oxygen. Right. Well, there are people who, and there's very famous recall studies where people, they leave their body, they're floating in the room, and they can tell you they come in dead. And they haven't been revived yet. And they can tell you what color shoelaces the nurse was wearing, what the doctor said, or how he dropped a scalpel or whatever.
And what side his hair's parted on.
Yeah, all these things that could never, ever be recalled because the person is dead, absolutely dead walking in. And they're revived, but they come back and they have these memories because they physically saw it out of self. That consciousness has been divorced from the physical form that we have now, much like the spirit that we're communicating with. Pim van Lommel is a Dutch doctor who, if nobody's familiar with him, he's the guy doing the good work right now. He's a cardiologist, and what he has done, when people see him, basically he is an emergency room cardiologist. People come in, they've already died or are dying from a heart attack. And he started to realize that you've got all these things, all these people reporting the same thing. So he decided to do a test. So he resuscitated, I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but it's somewhere around 350 individuals who were brought into his emergency room dead. They were resuscitated. About 20% of them reported near-death experiences, and the studies are still going on, and that they're so prevalent, as a matter of fact, that he was able to take this particular data and publish it in the Lancet, which is the leading medical journal in the world. So, believe it or not, near-death experience has found its way into the leading medical journal in the world, which is just absolutely fascinating to me. And there's so much science happening out there right now. And the cool thing is, when you start to dig into where the science is happening, it's all happening in consciousness. And consciousness, like I said earlier, just so intertwines with the paranormal that for somebody to be well-rounded and knowledgeable in this particular field, you really have to start to understand how consciousness may or may not work in the paranormal field, because scientists have looked for consciousness. They've looked for the locus in the brain. It does not exist. I can't remember the name of the doctor off the top of my head, but it was in the 1930s through the 70s. This particular doctor wanted to find consciousness in a rat brain. So what he did is he tried to figure out where consciousness exists. So he taught a rat, and over 30 years of these particular rats, he did this experiment over 30 years, thousands and thousands and thousands of rats. He taught them a maze. And then when they were done with the maze, he would take out a little section of the brain and then have them run the maze again and run it. And then it would keep going and going and going to the point where the rats had up to 80% of their brain removed. They basically just had the muscle connections left to move your body, the rat's body, and they could still do the maze. He joked that this memory, this consciousness, this conscious memory must exist across the brain, because there was no middle brain. It was all just destroyed. 80% of the brain gone, and these rats still remembered how. So that's just something that's absolutely fascinating, because that's consciousness, and that's the locus of our thought. I personally believe that our bodies are receivers. Our brains are receivers of consciousness. Our brain does all the math. It's the computer, and our consciousness does not exist in this state. And the studies that I've told you, that I've just spoken about, have demonstrated that consciousness doesn't exist in this particular state. More basically, it's existing in another plane, and we're just channeling it. More importantly, I've recorded evidence of this. And I know you've heard this before, Tina, and you probably know where I'm going with this one. So on Ghost Boxes, I've been able to record the voice of people who are alive and well and known to me.
Yes, I remember this one.
Yeah, it's fascinating. On 2 occasions, the other individual, there were 2 individuals. One was asleep, the other, and practicing lucid dreaming. The other one was asleep, and I hadn't talked to him in several years. And he came through and said my name in his voice, and he said the name Karina. So I contacted him via email because I no longer had his phone number. This was about 2010, somewhere around there. I no longer had his phone number, so I emailed him. I sent him the clip, and he's like, "That's it. That's my voice, and it also says Karina." And I'm like, "Yeah, what does Karina mean to you?" He's like, "Well, I just met Karina 2 weeks ago, and he's still with her today." He was telling me somehow astrally with his consciousness through my ghost box that he's with Karina, and that's where he's supposed to be. Another person came through. She was practicing lucid dreaming, and she said, "Hey, Tim." And I had her record "Hey, Tim" directly afterwards. And you compare the 2 of them, and the freaky part about it, you run it through a spectrograph, and the frequency bumps going between what came through the ghost box and her voice, the frequencies match up. Now, when you actually consider how a voice is made, it's air being pushed up through a diaphragm that goes through the larynx and vibrates the vocal cords, the tongue and the mouth and all this stuff. Everybody's frequencies they're like thumbprints when you're speaking. Voice recognition is a thing because of that. And her frequencies match up with what came through a ghost box. But somehow, her voice comes through the ghost box. But if it's a spirit body, I don't know even how she was able to produce those same frequencies. And finally, before I get off this giant tangent, the final one is the one that really blew my mind, because I was doing a ghost box session at a table, and I had a woman sitting right next to me, and her voice comes through the ghost box, and she speaks directly afterwards. So somehow her consciousness was projecting to the point where it came through my ghost box. You can hear it overriding all the audio, and then she speaks right afterwards, and the voice is the exact same. So somehow this lady sitting next to me, her voice is coming through a ghost box at the same time that other spirit communication is coming through. Now, all of this just shows that, consciousness is the big, deep end we need to dig into if we're going to ever make strides in the paranormal.
Yeah, agreed. I wish you could see me. I just caught myself literally leaning towards my laptop so I don't miss a single word, because I want to hear all of it.
Oh, I know. I spoke very quick just to try to fit it all in there.
No, I see. I love it. This is why I try not to ever miss one of your talks, because it just intrigues me like you would not believe. Oh, well, I had a really, really good question in the chat room for you, Tim. We are down. You got about 4.5 minutes to answer this one. Have you ever used old reel-to-reel for EVP, and do you think it's a good technique due to it being magnetic?
Well, actually, there's a couple different aspects of this. One, I've never used reel-to-reel. I don't own one, unfortunately. But if you go back to all the progenitors of EVP, they all used reel-to-reel, and then they moved to cassette. What was realized back then is, EVP, reel-to-reel is designed to be for recording. It's designed to be dead quiet. You're not going to get any noise from the device itself. That was kind of a hindrance. When Jurgensen was recording EVP, he realized that, there needed to be some kind of background noise happening. But his first EVPs, he said, because he was recording bird songs, he said it sounded like the voice was carried by the wind on the leaves. So what he realized was that you had to have a carrier wave, some kind of little burble in the background. That's called transform EVP. I'm not going to go into it, but it's one of the main theories of EVP and how it's made is through transformation of existing sound in our environment. So what he did is he started to use white noise in the background, and he did this by using an interfrequency between 2 radio stations. So you just get that nice little burble in the background. No communication, just gentle white noise. And once he started implementing that, there was all kinds of communication that would ride upon it. Radova fine-tuned it a little bit and came up with something called the diode, which was basically a germanium diode that also known as a cat's whisker in ham radio. It generates a little bit of a white noise burst, so he was using that to record with as well. And all the people who were first into EVP right up until the digital age always used some kind of background noise. And if you go back and listen to those EVPs, you need that background noise to make the EVPs pop. So we come to our modern age, and we're using digital recorders, and everybody's like, well, I'm recording EVP just fine, and I'm not using any noise. Well, fact is, your digital recorder uses something called integrated circuits, IC chips. IC chips are not quiet. They're very noisy, as a matter of fact, and for them to be as quiet as possible, that's when you're starting to use converters that cost several $1,000s. That's what you get in the big studios. Yeah. But in your little recorder, you're not going to have that. So what it has is its own filter, and the noise that's generated by the filter is filtered out, so it doesn't come through in your recording. So that noise is there, whether you believe it or not, and it's there. That's in the background that's being transformed for your recording. Now, the other part of the question was magnetic. Now, there are two different theories on how EVP can be created. One is basically using a transducer from a microphone. That little diaphragm that comes through it captures the sound. It goes through its conversion and gets imprinted on either on tape or converted to digital. So you're using zeros and ones. Binary is the digital language. We already know that, and we know that binary can be used. I mean, that's how ovuluses happen. It's how the SB7 happens. It's how your EVPs happen. Now, with magnetic, there's something interesting about that. You can look at the work of Alexander McCrae, and what he did, I can't remember if it was Oxford or Cambridge. It's the university that actually has a cage designed by Michael Faraday. What he did is he put his reel-to-reel recorder and a cassette recorder in a Faraday cage, removed all microphones, so it was just tape. And guess what happened? He recorded EVP just on tape. So therefore, whatever entity is trying to communicate with us can impress itself without a microphone onto your recording medium. How freaking cool is that?
Yeah, that is awesome. I really see you just have all the really, really cool information, the stuff that just ultimately intrigues me. And that, the chat room is just loving it because everybody's like, ooh, yeah. Tim, love it. Listen, we're just down to our last minute or two here. Please tell everyone, where can we find you? If they want to get a hold of you or talk to you or ask a question, where can they get a hold of you?
Easiest way is my paranormal study email account, learn@paranormalstudy.com. I'm also generally available on Facebook, and I respond to a lot of people on Facebook. I don't have much room for friends, but I'm making more room every day as I see all the political bantering and crazy conspiracies flowing around. So there's some room opening up on my list. But yeah, keep an eye on Paranormal Study. Our Facebook page has over 200,000 likes on it. It's just absolutely crushing it. We're posting new content there daily. We also relaunched the Metascience Foundation, so that is going to be coming to full strength within 6 months, and that's a different conversation entirely, but we're basically taking the work of George Meek and the Metascience Foundation and basically bringing back all the techniques and reel-to-reels and cassettes from all of these EVP people that I mentioned and making them public.
Awesome. Love it. Guys, please, if you've got an extra question, ask Tim, or Tim, will you come back on my show? Because we have a couple more questions we didn't get to tonight.
Yeah, not a problem at all. It was a
perfect. Pleasure. Love it. Guys, I just wanted to let you know, next week, my guest is going to be Scotty Rourke. He actually used to be here on ParaX, but he has his own radio station now, Z Talk, and he is a psychic medium, a very good friend. This guy is funny. You guys are going to be laughing, so wear your para depends next weekend. And if you need to get a hold of me, you can find me at Illuminating the Paranormal on Facebook or any of my 3 pages, Nature's Earthware, WARE, Heirloom Haberdashery, or at 3 Sisters Smudging. You guys have a really, really good evening. Take care, be safe, and I will see you guys next weekend. Bye.